Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in. We have an incredible conversation today with a lady who is one of the producers of The Same Room. She also has her own pod where she's on called In the Room. Without any further ado, welcome today's guest, Brenda Palmer.
Hi, guys.
Thank you so much for being here, sis. You're here.
I'm here.
Okay. Give people a little bit about your background before we get into the church story and the church hurt story.
Yeah.
For folks who aren't familiar with you, give us a little bit of your background.
Yeah, so I'm Brenda Palmer. I'm originally from Chicago. I live right now in between LA and Chicago.
Okay.
And so that's
Bi-locational.
Yeah, I always say like bi-city because it ain't bi-coastal.
Okay.
Because
Almost.
it's in the Midwest. Yeah, so I do that. I'm a podcaster, a producer, and a preacher. So I am graced with the opportunity to travel around and preach the gospel. I'm on a podcast called In the Room. I have my own podcast called Life in Perspective, which is just about journeying with Jesus and what that looks like. I host gatherings, pop-up gatherings across the country called Come Alive for people to encounter Jesus in an authentic way without the schedule. I worked in production in church for like 15 years. I know what it's like when you hit that wave and then it's like, oh, we got to wrap this up because we got to go. And so I do that right now. And then right now I'm just following God, doing whatever.
Amen. We met on a panel we just did in LA with the homie Ebenezer, which was a great event right in downtown LA. And we were on a panel together and I heard a bit of your story and I was like, oh, we got to get you on.
Yes.
And believe it or not, the minority of folks who are women that watch this channel, which is like 25%, are like, we need more women. We need more women. And I'm like, all right, we're going to get more women.
I met one.
I met a woman who's a podcaster. Well, to be fair, there aren't as many women podcasts that I'm familiar with.
Yeah.
So when I meet them, I'm like,
For sure.
come on. Like, I love the different perspectives and just the insight that you're going to have that's probably going to be a little different than mine.
Yeah.
And we'll get into some of that stuff later that I think is extremely valuable. So how do you like working on The Same Room? I mean, we've had Angelica call in.
Yeah.
It seems like God's doing just something so fascinating with
sure.
her that I'm like, yo, like to have that sort of influence and platform and access, but at the same time to have a heart for Jesus as she's trying to figure it out. And your guys' guests, like you guys had a fire Chance the Rapper interview.
Yes.
What's it like being a part of that whole process?
Man, it's amazing because it's going to sound really crazy, but a lot of the things that happen on The Same Room are birthed in prayer. It's so crazy. Like we literally prayed the Chance interview in. Like we were on a prayer call week to week and then they like connect somewhere else. And he's like, I've been looking for you. And she's like, I've been looking for you.
Wow.
And then he does The Same Room. And one of our highest viewed videos is him talking about spiritual warfare, which is crazy. And so, I love The Same Room. Even when we switched and had Ange become a host, it was like a moment. We're doing a show called Empower Her, and it's like all women panel. And Ange has this moment where she shares about her encounter with Jesus, and literally the entire room freezes. Like makeup artists, everybody in the room, not all believers, like are in tears. Like the moment just shifts. Like you could just sense the presence of God on a set of a talk show. So no, I love it. I love that we're defying the fact that faith can only exist inside the four walls of the church. No, it also can exist in culture if you steward it properly.
That's good. It could also exist in culture if we steward it properly.
For sure.
That's good. I'm so glad you guys got a chance. He watched some of my videos, but he don't want to come on my platform. I think
I understand that.
I get it. I'm not mad at it, but I was just humbled that he watched some of my stuff. I was like, that's so cool. So that's something I would love to sit down with him at some point too. I think that'd be great. But it was really cool to see that side of him. He also showed that in his interview with Kirk, which I thought was cool to kind of see that side. And he's trying to figure it out. But that's awesome. And then in terms of now In the Room and your stuff, how is that different? Like how is the topics and the flow of that different? People want to check you out.
Okay. So for two things. So my podcast is called Life in Perspective, which I started it during the pandemic, just in my closet, just processing the pandemic and kind of recognizing how the story that I'll share later today paralleled with how I was feeling in the pandemic. Just life just switched. And so that's kind of how it started back in 2020. I'm on season 3 now, and I'm having like guests with my friends.
Nice.
And that's pretty different because it's just kind of like it started as like, this is how I'm feeling today, and this is what God is saying about it. Hope it makes sense to you. And it's super relatable. I'm super authentic. Like, I know sometimes believers like to patty cake and fluff it up like life is great, but sometimes it ain't. And then In the Room was a complete exciting like accident. It started as an after show. It's like the producers, the behind the scenes people, we're going to talk about the episodes. And it just turned into us having 4 friends having authentic conversations about life. And how our faith applies to it.
Guys, if you're here live, do me a solid. Destroy and obliterate that like button. That would really help us out. All right, let's get into your story, and specifically your story with church hurt. What I appreciate about your story is it's a lot like my story. I grew up in the Armenian Apostolic Church. I was an altar boy. And in that process, there were some older altar boys, some essay happened, and I had a lot of hostility towards God in a very, very serious way. But thankfully, in God's grace and God's providence, I ended up in a place where I love the local church. I'm active. I want to do more. And it's been healthy for me. And no church is perfect.
For sure.
But I think having relationships with pastors and remaining faithful, it's been one of the best things for me in terms of growth in the Lord and discipleship and so many good things about the local church that we don't talk about enough. And what I love about your story is that you didn't run. You didn't, okay, I'm done with this Christianity thing. And you had, when we get into it, you had every reason to feel that way, but you didn't. And so take us back in terms of set the stage for us and let's get into that.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll give like context in a sense of like I'm a PK. Both of my parents are pastors.
Okay.
So for the most part, I grew up in church. Not always in relationship, but I for sure grew up in church.
Okay.
In like a lot of churches. Like I've been to a Baptist church, an apostolic church, non-denominational churches. I went to school at an AME church. Like I have a lot of experience with different denominations, I guess. This particular church I was attending for 8 years. I was on staff for 5.
What was your job on staff?
So I started off as a volunteer. I transitioned to like running social media. I went from social media to becoming a media associate. Then I was director of communications and creative. So I ran production. My pastor at the time, he had a lot of things moving, like writing a book. He had a group. So I handled creative for all of that. I traveled with them. I also was like, some people call it armor bearer. We called them PPAs.
I was going to say, you sound like you was an armor bearer.
I was for sure. So I traveled with his wife, who was also a pastor. I kept their boys. I had keys to their house.
Holy moly.
I was very like, that's like my second family. I would identify him as my spiritual father at the time.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So you were really immersed.
For sure.
And you were kind of it sounds like a Renaissance woman, jack of all trades.
Yeah, kind of.
Whatever need to get done.
Yeah, we going to do it
you up.
For sure.
Wow.
Yeah. And it wasn't like a super small church, maybe like a mid-sized church. So yeah. And I feel like when you're young in your 20s, that's what you do when you're on staff at church. It's like whatever.
Well, I don't know if you feel this way, but I would say my experience of working at a church, I worked 2 years at my church before I transitioned into doing music full time in 2015. And I would say a lot of what I did may have not directly translated to music, but it definitely translated into what I'm doing now.
Oh, for sure.
So in terms of working at a church, I mean, it's like the best boot camp.
It is the best. If you want to do anything entertainment.
That sounds funny to say out loud.
It sounds funny to say it out loud. Like you should start at church.
Media.
But
anything in media.
Yeah, anything in media for sure, because you learn everything. Like my dad had a church. It was a storefront church. So I ran audio, which even since I was like 15 years old. And so I even wanted to go to school to like be an engineer originally.
Wow. Like an audio engineer. Wow.
Yeah, because I did audio at my dad's church. Like I loved it. I always loved music. And so I feel like for sure, I think every skill I have came from that. Because
I would agree. I would say the same for me.
I was doing everything like book launches and album release and tours. And I'm like, what is happening right now? But yeah, for sure. Yeah, some of the best years of my life.
Yeah. Yeah, it's this is why I feel like people should serve.
Absolutely.
Like go serve, get plugged in. you may not initially do what you want to do, but you serve where you're needed, and then serve where you want to serve, and then eventually you develop this unicorn of a skill set that, yes, you can go on staff at a church and learn even more, or you can go in the marketplace and kind
kill it.
And kill it.
Because you can do any media company, news outlet, TV station. If you have multiple skills, if you can create and edit, if you can be in front of the camera and behind the camera, it sets you apart.
When did you discover, sorry to go sidetrack, but when did you discover that you had the ability to be in front of people? Because I'm like listening to you, and like you have a great radio voice, right? Like but my dentist told me that the other day. I was getting clean. She said, you have a great video. I was like, I've never heard anybody tell me how to great. But you legitimately, like, you sound like someone I would hear on the radio, like Hot 97.
You should tell them. No,
106 in Park, not 106 in Park. Well, 106 in Park too. No,
what was used to be my dream job.
Breakfast Club. You know what I mean? Like you have like a very
for sure
radio voice. When did you discover that? Like, I could be in front of the camera as well.
I never wanted to be. I feel like it doesn't matter though. Like it's always been that. Okay, so I studied broadcast in undergrad, and then I ended up going to grad school at Syracuse, and I ended up swapping from broadcast to production. And so, but whatever we would do projects, they would always make me be on camera, and I'm like, I hate that. I just want to be behind it. I think it's a gift, and I think when things are gifts, it's what God wants you to do. Because I've only been preaching for 2 years.
Okay. So you're at this church. You're super immersed. This is basically your extended family, spiritual father. And what happens next?
All right. So, kind of like super immersed. And then I started dating this guy, and like a little backstory about him is like, we were friends for like 10 years. We attended another church together. So we kind of knew each other, and we had mutual friends. We were like best friends. We were really close. And then after our friendship, then we started dating. And he also was really close with our pastors, like just because that's kind of like the younger generation kind of had a little more access to them. And so I was on staff, and then he was transitioning jobs. So he was like temporarily on staff. And so I come across like this message, and you know how you see something and you like, I don't know, it's a little off.
Were you like going through his phone?
No, I literally, like, you know how if you have an iPhone and you put it down and you don't lock it, and you know it like fades, it doesn't necessarily like go black right away. Yeah. And so it was like doing that. And so I seen it, and then I was just kind of like, oh, okay, cool. A little bit more context is like, I was leading the young adult ministry. And I had just called a fast 2 days before that. And I'm like, hey, we're going to do a 30-day fast. I just feel like we need to press in and just grow in relationship with Jesus. Like, go after him. This is day 2 of the fast. I see the text. I'm like, I'm gonna let it slide.
Do you remember what the text said?
I do. No, I'm not telling you what it said.
Okay. But it was something in that text.
It was just off.
Set off your spidey senses.
For sure. And women, we have that. We know even when we don't want to know. And so I see the message. I'm like, something about this isn't right, but we also tell ourselves like, nah, I'm tripping. And so for 3 days, like, I didn't sleep. I'm a visual learner. So once I see something, it's there. And it just kept going. And so I ended up being able to see actual conversations they were having. And it confirmed, like what I thought. Let's say this happens April 2nd. Or maybe roughly could see their conversations for 2 weeks. And while this is happening, I'm still going to work every day. I'm still kind of as best as I can engaging normally. And to be completely honest with you, I actually never anticipated sharing it with anybody. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think because I was a leader, because I've grown up in church, I know the weight of something like that. I know what it does to people. I know what it does to their view of God. And I just was prepared to carry it.
So how did you end up seeing the rest of the conversation? Did you was it like access to a laptop and the iMessages were synced?
I'm not going to incriminate myself, but there are ways, and there were ways, and I saw.
Wow. So you go from seeing a text to then.
And I never saw the same text because originally I just wanted to see the first text I saw, and I never saw that again. So it was kind of like, oh, okay, cool. And then I'm like, well, if something is happening, like I'll see something again. And so then that's kind of how I was like, oh, you know, like we'll just see what happens. And it happened. It confirmed.
How long was it from the first text message to when you saw the 10 days of conversation?
Like 2 days.
2 days, and you're still on this fast. So you see this text message exchange. We don't know how you saw it, but you saw it, and this is between the gentleman you're in a relationship with,
For sure.
and your pastor, aka your boss, aka your spiritual father, your mentor, all the above,
all these things.
And what do you discover in this 10-day of back and forth?
Yeah, just that that they were in a relationship, whatever that means. Here's what I'll say. I'll say the way he was communicating with me is the way he was communicating with him. Oh, these sound effects.
Hold on. The way he was communicating with you, I'm assuming you're saying like,
just tone, you know, I mean,
like pet names?
You know, I'm not giving you no details of what these messages say. You're not going,
babe?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
You can go ahead and move on. I'm not doing it.
So you discover based on the tone and the what that ultimately they are in a relationship. Entanglement,
They're engaging
something.
Somehow they are engaging deeper than a normal father-son relationship. I'm gonna say that. Because when people say relationship, it's like, oh, they were, I can't give you those details.
Sure.
I could just say that what I saw, it concluded that this is inappropriate. They're engaging inappropriately, how they should not be engaging.
So what do you do?
I was devastated. What do? I just cope. What do most of us do when we experience something that is devastating that could also hurt other people? I know I could say for me, and I could just say for me as being a Black woman, is like we try to protect people. And I feel like that part of my life is really weird, but I was making it every day. I honestly pressed into God. I feel like what I could blame on God, I was like, hey, I need you to be able to survive this. So what did I do? I started internalizing, and essentially over the next, I don't know, 45 days, I started to die. Wow. Like literally. Because I'm still going to work, still serving. And we're all at work together. Yeah. So it's like, I know all of these things, but I'm internalizing them. Because it's like, who do I share it with? My parents were also there. My mom was on staff at church. They were both elders at the church. So it's kind of like anybody I share it with, it's going to affect them.
And so in your mind, are you also kind of like, you said you go into protector mode.
For sure.
And so you're like, if I say anything,
it unravels everything.
Unravels everything.
Yeah. And I was very, very close with their kids. Like their sons are like my brothers. Yeah. And the wife, who's also a pastor, we were tight. Yeah. So then I just stopped going over there. I stopped engaging because like I don't actually know how to look you in your face, and I know this and tell you this, and I also don't think you're gonna believe me. Yeah. It's just I feel like there are all these things, which I feel like anybody who has experienced any type of situation that's close to this is like all these things go through your head. Like, are people gonna believe me, or what does it mean for me, like kind of thing. And so it felt easier to just deal with it.
Wow. And I think sometimes what people don't understand about these sorts of situations is that the impact it has on the other person's community and friend group.
For sure.
Because this is your family, this is your community. You can't even look at these folks the same. Yeah. You can't probably do your job the same. Yeah. Everything is so rattled. Yeah. But you go on for 45 days.
For sure.
And don't say anything.
No, and I know, like, because I've released a whole podcast about it and nobody would probably ever believe me. I never intended to say anything. I think I got to the point where it had started to affect my health because I wasn't really eating. I was depressed, but still managing life. It's so crazy. It's like literally the grace of God, like for real, because even like once it came to the forefront, I remember my old pastor saying to me, he's like, you knew this for a long time. And he was like, and you never changed. And he was like, you proved to me how real God is. Because here's the thing, like hurt people. There's a lot of things I could have done. I ran the media at the church. I ran the email list. I ran the text threads. Like there are a lot of things I could have did. I think it speaks to maturity. I think it also speaks to my heart for God's people. It's like, it wasn't ever about that. I even throughout the entire thing had compassion for them. You know what I'm saying? Like I never was in a space where it was like, I hated them. you know, there were moments where I was angry, but not until I had moved to California and I'm processing all the things that had happened. And so like, I think in this season, I always say it was like my journey to God's heart.
Yeah.
Cause
that's heavy. That's heavy. What do you do after the 45 days?
Well, there's a conversation that's had.
So you do confront it.
I do not confront it. They confront me.
Whoa, hold on. Why did they confront you?
So because I finally broke up with the guy. Because here's the thing, like this happened in April. I didn't break up with him until, I don't know, like a month later, first weekend in May.
Yeah.
And so then it's kind of like, hey, what's going on? What happened? And so then they're just like, man, then they start realizing like, you haven't even been to the house. Like, what's going on? Like, and I'm kind of like, oh, I'm good. Like, you know, it is what it is. They kind of kept pressing it. And so I'm at work and they're like calling me into the office for a meeting to find out like why we broke up. And they asked for a conversation and I said, well, I guess, you know, we got to do this. So I said, I'll have a conversation, but I don't feel comfortable having it without my parents.
That's good.
And so then they're like, wait, what? Because they're like my parents and I've been there for 8 years and they're like, you never had to have your parents. I'm like, no, I need my parents just because I needed to feel safe. You know what I'm saying? I need it. And the crazy thing is like, and you
never told anybody in this whole 45
So here's the thing, like one person knew, like, and he kind of had a similar role that I did at the church.
Yeah.
And he knew because when I first saw the first message, I needed to know that I wasn't like tripping.
Yeah.
So I'm like, dude, is this how these things roll? This how this goes? Like, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. And so, oh, I'm so sorry.
You're good. No sweat. Hey guys, if you're watching this, do us a solid, smash the like button. If you're just tuning in, you're like, what's going on? Listen, rewind the stream, okay? And get caught up. You can rewind it probably about 5-10 minutes and just watch it back in 2 speed, and then it'll catch you up in terms of what's going on. All right, let's jump back in.
Yeah, and so I tell him, and then we kind of journey through this together. The other guy at the church, like in a sense of like,
hold on. So you tell who?
The guy, he kind of had a similar position to he was
a coworker.
Got it.
Colleague, coworker.
Yeah. And he's known them forever too. You know what I'm saying? And so
you just basically needed to know, like, I'm not crazy.
Yeah.
I need to process this, but I'm still trying to protect people
for sure. And I knew he would do that.
Okay.
And so, my mom recognizes the change in my behavior because it was much so like go to work, maybe eat a Chipotle. Then I was like in the bed. I was like turned off the world. I was probably worshiping and listening to sermons.
I mean, you were holding on to Jesus with all of you. Yeah.
For sure. Because I'm like, if it ain't me and you, I ain't going to make it through the day. And so my mom is like kind of asking what's going on. I'm like, nah, I'm not telling you. I'm like, if you want to know, you should ask the Lord. Bro, he told her.
Hold on. You told your mom, I'm not telling you what's going on. If you want to know,
you need to ask the Lord.
Ask the Lord. And she figured it out to the detail.
The next day, I come in the house. She came home from work early. I'm like, you good? And she looked how I felt.
Oh,
and I was like, are you all right? And she's like, nah, I don't think so. She said, I had some prayer time. I asked God something, and He said this. Oh my God. And I was like, I said, oh, I'm pretty sure you got it.
Yeah.
And so then she shares what it is. And for the very first time, I break down and cry.
Oh.
Because I finally feel like, ooh, finally. And she just, keeps saying like she's sorry,
Yeah.
over and over. And so I'm all like, you can't tell my dad.
Because Pops might lose it. Yeah.
I'm like, nah, bro, you can't.
Yeah.
He gonna blow the spot up.
And his dad on staff at the church too?
No, but he's an elder, so he's in ministry. Yeah.
Okay.
So my dad's like, I'm like, you can't tell my dad, but she's like, girl, I couldn't hold it. But for the most part, it stayed that way.
Wow.
And so that's why I kind of felt.
That's very honorable.
Yeah.
Because I got other questions, but just for you to not go and vent to the whole world about it, not to say that there aren't times where people need to be exposed, but to have that restraint, process privately in prayer, that's very mature of you. Wow. So I'm sorry, go on.
No, you cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we ended up having a meeting, and they were kind of like very confused because I'm asking like my parents are there. They're like, well, we don't know if they could come. I call my parents. They were just sitting down for breakfast. My mom's like, oh, we'll be there in 15. And so they come. I just basically put it on the table like, hey, I saw this, this string of messages, and I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to do with this. And honestly, I can't work here no more. Because by this point, and I use the language like this is killing me. Because it was. Like I was like having breakouts. I was losing weight. Like pictures, it was bad. And so I'm like, nah, I cannot do this. And so we have like this talk, there's like, no, it's not that. I could explain. And I'm just like, nah, I'm good on that. So they start having a conversation with my parents. I'm like taking my keys off the ring because I'm like, really, I'm done with this. And so it kind of just transitions from there to like all of these back and forth conversations. That day though, they gave me like time off for a month.
Sure.
And
so they never owned it?
Not in my ex did. For sure.
Okay.
For
so
sure.
At least he owned it.
Yeah.
But were they gaslighting you? Were they like, oh no, it's not what you think it is. You didn't see what you think you saw.
The guy I was dating never did that to me.
Okay.
Never.
Okay.
Others did.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like
in terms of the pastor and stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Like with me, no. But when there were other people, for sure, like
So it's almost like privately they're like, like we're caught.
Yeah.
We're not gonna act like we're not caught.
Yeah.
But within other people, as this is starting to get out, they're still kind of downplaying it.
Yeah,
like
for
she
sure.
didn't really get it. She misunderstood.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because even when my podcast came out, it was like, nah, this isn't true. And I was just like, but again, too, like we all have our perception of things. You know what I'm saying? Like I know what it did to me. That's it. I can only tell my story.
Yeah. Is it possible that? Well, okay. First of all, let's go back. So the guy you were seeing, in terms of him owning it, what did that sound like? He just flat out was like, yeah, this is what it is, or
no.
Yeah.
So I left for a month. They're like, you can have 30 days. So I took 30 days. I went to International House of Prayer in Kansas. I drove there, stayed there for like 7 days. Like, Lord, I need to pour out. And then I ended up going to LA and and I got to tell this part of the story because I was really in a space where I just didn't know. Like, this is to your point, this is my job, this is my community, this is my life. And I didn't understand why this was happening to me. Yeah. I just did not understand it. And I remember visiting one LA, and I literally tell Pastor Teray this all the time, like he preached a message that saved my life. Because I'm pretty sure I probably would have gave up on life after that. Because it just was hard. I feel like my world was shattered. And so he preached a message, which is also the title of my first episode of my podcast, called When Everything Changed. And he's like, over and over again, he's trying to read the scripture and he keeps saying, it had to happen. It had to happen. It had to happen. I was like, I never cried so much in a church service. But I felt like God was using him to speak to me, like this had to happen because if not, you never become the person that you are, you know? And I can say that 5 years later, like I'm grateful for that situation. I'm grateful for it. It probably was one of the worst things I've ever experienced in life, but I'm grateful for it. But
wow. So you take your 30 days.
Yep. And then I go back.
And then you go back.
I go back.
Okay.
I go back. I never go back to work there. Okay. So I come back. I leave like May, Mother's Day, come back June 10th. Okay. I never worked there, but I continue to serve.
You continue to serve?
Because God didn't release me.
Whoa.
Yep. So I knew I couldn't be on staff, and part of that was just my own conviction. Like I'm the media person. It's my job to communicate the vision of the church. I don't really know what's happening with that. I just didn't feel comfortable with that. Yeah. And so I felt the okay to say like, no, I'm good on the job here. And I just continued to serve. So I was still leading all the ministries, young adults, creative production. Like I was still doing that. And this was June, and I didn't leave. I moved away to LA August 28th.
Okay, so it wasn't like you were there.
It wasn't for, no.
You were there just for a little bit, trying to
for sure
sunset your roles.
And also like protect the house. Because something like that just hitting doesn't benefit anybody. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And for the most part, we had an understanding of like, this is what happened. There were apologies given, like ultimately, and we were like pursuing moving forward. I don't really know what that looked like at the time, but I was open to it. So yeah, that's kind of like what happened. And then I moved.
Yeah.
And then 2 years later, I dropped a podcast. Because even when I left, people still didn't know. You know, like, so it's kind of like, oh, Brenda is leaving, moving to LA, like following dreams, whatever. Yeah. And then it was just kind of, it was that.
Yeah. Yeah, guys, we're going to go to your questions in a moment. I got more questions, okay? We might get into some reactions. So if you're here, we'll prioritize the super chats. You could just drop the capital questions, and then we'll get to some of them. I'll mark some of them, so just bear with us. So you moved to LA 2 years later. Well, first of all, how did you not let this completely harden your heart towards the local church? Because I could understand kind of being in the middle of it and kind of having like blinders on and maybe a little bit of what is that called, Stockholm syndrome, where you're like you want to protect your abusers. For sure. You know, I could understand that, but when you're now removed from it, how do you not let it completely harden you to the idea of the bride of Christ and the local church and serving and all that stuff?
I think that is solely because I have a relationship with Jesus apart from the church.
That's good.
And that's why I'm always pushing that. Like, you need to know who Jesus is for yourself.
Come on.
Because if I only knew Jesus through my pastor, I would be tore off. I would be tore off. But I know the character of Jesus. And I know this is not the character of God. So I'm not going to blame him for my pastor's humanity.
Sure.
I feel like that is what I stuck to. Now, was I disappointed with God? Absolutely. And did I have to process that? Yes. I didn't have a chance to process it until I moved away because I felt like so much of my journey consisted of me trying to like make sure everybody, like the people that didn't know, which like my parents and the other guy who also was married, so then his wife knows. But it's kind of like also pastoring through that and saying, hey guys, we still have to honor him. That's something I hold in my heart. It's like, he is still a pastor, fail or not fail. We all make mistakes, but I'm gonna make sure that on the other side of this, that I'm good. And so making sure that my heart stay pure as much as possible. And it's weird. I feel like I only can say it was God because I never had this like anger towards him. The other guy did. He was angry.
The guy, your colleague.
Yeah, he was very angry. It took him a while to process that. I just never felt that. I felt bad for them. I felt like, man, there's something on the inside of you that you haven't dealt with that's causing this, and not even considering the amount of people.
How big was this church?
Let's roughly say like 1,500 people.
Okay, so this is almost, it's practically a mega church.
Yeah. Like, so.
Yeah. So 2 years later, you get into the media space.
Yeah.
You drop your first podcast episode.
Which I didn't want to do.
And you share this story.
I share this story.
And did you hear any feedback? Any folks from the church tapping in? Like, no, what was the reaction?
It changed my life completely.
Okay.
Which is crazy because I knew that would happen. I feel like, because I was like, oh, I'm gonna start a podcast, just thinking it's gonna be this little rinky dink thing, and then God's like, no, it's time, and I'm like, it's time for what? Because we taking this to the grave. Like, we ain't never talking about this. Because if I'm completely honest, I also carried a little bit of shame.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Around it, and so then there's like talking about it, and then you meet people, and it's like, bro, I don't need you to feel sorry for me, like, you know what I'm saying? I just didn't want that, and I just remember, and then it was. I didn't want people to feel like I was on this vendetta. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, come on, y'all, it's been 2 years. Like, and that, it wasn't that. And so then it was like, I don't want people to misinterpret my heart. Yeah. And I went through all these things. And I just remember God asking me, like, do you care more about what people think of you than you do of what I'm asking you to do?
Yeah.
And so that was.
That's a great question. Wow. Okay. And you never heard anything from them specifically when the pod came out, or like them backpedaling or anything like that? No,
I heard a lot of things because I still had friends that attended the church. Well, I had some friends, then I dropped the podcast, and I lost some friends.
Were there any folks that heard the podcast about like, deuces, I'm out? Yeah. Like, this is crazy that y'all did this.
You would think that, but I think a lot of people, I think we have a misconception of honor in church. And there is this idea that even though it happened, or even though you felt that way, you should cover the man of God. And I ain't never read that.
That ain't in my Bible.
I ain't never read that in the Bible. And I don't know. And so then it was kind of like people were holding me to this standard that they weren't even holding their leader to. And so then it was a lot. Like, you see, that's my first episode. By the time I get to episode 4, I'm literally crying on the podcast. It's called like I Need a Moment. Yeah. Because I needed a moment. I knew that crazy thing is the day before the podcast released, their oldest son just randomly texted me out of the blue, just like, "Hey, big sis, just checking on you." And that almost stopped me from releasing it, because I knew after this moment I would never talk to them again.
Yeah.
And so
that's hard.
It is. It's a really like, all right, it's a really take up your cross and follow me kind of thing. Because even going back to Chicago for a long time was really hard. Because it would just remind me of the pain. It would remind me of all the things I lost. It hurt because I drew a line in the sand.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you drew that line.
For sure.
I think that's great. So we're going to get to some of these questions here in a second, and we'll do some lighter content. Is there the tension of having... And shout out to Tim Ross in the house. He just dropped the gym.
Tim is my bro.
Yeah, shout out to Tim. He said you can honor and be honest.
For sure.
Which that's where my brain goes to. Was there ever a part of you that if someone's disqualified themselves from ministry, which I would say, I mean, you can't go any further than this sort of relationship, right? Like, forget the adultery aspect. Then you're talking about this sort of whatever it was, whether it was physical, emotional, I don't know. I don't need to know. But if that doesn't disqualify, or at least, hey, you need to go take a break.
Yeah.
I don't know what does, right? And so was there ever a part of you, like, for the sake of the community there, like, maybe this does need to be exposed? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I mean, that's why I had the conversation.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Like, because I think there are so many things I was processing, and I think it's true. I think one of the things about non-denominational churches is that there isn't like this up level of accountability. You know what I'm saying? Like, sometimes they have like spiritual coverings and spiritual fathers, but then if they're in another state, how much does that weigh into the decision making? Because even my colleague and I were saying, like, having conversations like, who could we tell?
Yeah.
Like, I'm on staff. Like, who could I go to and say, hey, this is happening. I don't really know what to do, but somebody should do something. And so I think in our case, that didn't exist. There isn't anybody to say, go sit down. And I think that's because to be completely honest with you, my parents didn't leave that church right away. They stayed. But because there was never a let me sit down for a little bit. Let me get my heart together. Let me deal with this kind of moment, like an authentic one. I think it just became too much.
Did the wife know? Did the pastor's wife know?
Before?
It just in general?
No, not to my knowledge. But in that initial meeting, she was there. I think one thing I would have done differently was allow the guy I was dating to be in that meeting too. I think it would.
Okay, he was not in that.
He was not in that meeting.
Okay.
And so I think that would have. That would have changed things. I think a bit.
I think the tough part when you hear stuff like this is like it's possible that this was like a one-off outlier of a situation, but usually where there's smoke, there's fire. This was probably a pattern he had over the course of years, if not decades, of these weird, inappropriate type of interactions. You know, that's just like, ugh. I just, you know, yeah. I don't even know how to respond to that.
I don't have no thoughts.
Yeah. Let's go to some of these questions. We're going to go to some of these questions. All right. So Ashley said, do you think it's fair to the other church members that their pastor could be falling in sin, or did you just wait for God to handle it?
Yeah, I think to be honest with you, I ain't never experienced nothing like this.
Yeah.
So
because you're processing in real time.
In real time. Yeah. I'm thinking about people who are on their last leg with God, and what does this do to them? And I feel like my heart was like, how can I handle this best?
Yeah.
Where it's not emotional. Yeah. Because we could, you know.
Yeah. No, I think that's the part that, if we're being honest, as much as when we hear this, we want justice. We want, like, we naturally get angry. Yeah. Which anger is, my therapist has told me, is because you feel like there was an injustice that occurred. Sure. At the root of anger, there's some sort of injustice that occurred. So when people are hearing this, they're like, yo, I'm angry hearing it with you. There has to be justice. Yeah. But I think what we're forgetting is that you're also processing this in real time.
For sure.
So I'm thinking like, where are the elders? Where's the accountability? Who do you go to? How could the system be set up this way? But probably forgetting that, like, but this is your life.
Yeah. It's just like happening to me in real time.
Yeah.
For sure. And I think too, what we have to consider is like sometimes our form of justice, it doesn't align with God's justice. And the reality is, bro, God could do way more than I could ever. And I feel like I in my mind, I was thinking about the church. I was also being communicated that there are some steps being taken and there are some things I needed. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I can only take what I'm being told. You know what I'm saying? And then I think too, like, people can say they want to know the truth, then they get the truth, and they don't make decisions.
Yeah. No, that's good. Okay, let's look at some of these other questions. Brenda, what are promises of God that you held on to? That's a great question.
It is. Romans 8:28. That all things work together for the good of those who believe and are called according to the purpose of God. Like, bro, I actually moved to LA on August 28th. So it was like 8:28. It was like,
oh wow.
And then
is that on purpose or just happenstance?
I didn't pay attention to it.
What a trip.
But that was the promise that God gave me. Yeah. I just picked a day. I'm like, if I don't pick a date and buy a ticket, I won't leave. And definitely that. And then also that God's near to the brokenhearted. Because my heart was broken. It was shattered on so many different levels. And those two things held me together.
Yeah, that's good. This is a good question. Do you think more churches should have not necessarily a disciplinary committee, but a core small group of people that hold leadership accountable separate from the pastor?
For sure. I think there needs to be, I think for the safety of people who are like experiencing even just, we could say abuse, like where is the accountability? Where does it exist? I know there are some churches who do it very well. The church I was with for the last 2 years is a Free Methodist church, and they have systems that include clergy and lay. So it is, and that is how the entire system is set up. Every decision that is made has to have buy-in from both the congregation and the clergy people. And I think that is the most amazing structure, because too much of either is a disaster. So yeah, for sure. I think that needs to exist. And I also think that people who accept the call should have the fear of the Lord.
I mean, that's, you know what? And that's he didn't step down and there was no real discipline. To me, that's scarier.
It is.
Because like God's going to deal with him.
For sure.
Right? Like we see in 1 Corinthians chapter 5, there's some among you that are being sexually immoral, the type that the pagans won't even, talk about. A man's taking his father's wife and this whole thing. And then Paul's like, hand him over to Satan, so that like his soul could be won back over.
Yeah.
And so that's the spooky part, is that God's going to deal with him, and that's, if he doesn't repent or fix it, like it's probably going to be worse that way.
It is. I pray for the mercy of God though all the time.
Yeah. You're better Christian than I am. You're a better Christian than I am. Did this situation have an impact on how you approach future relationships? I mean, were there any signs that the guy you were dating with could have struggled with this area?
Yeah, and there was like I knew things. Okay. You know what I'm saying? Like I was aware of some things.
Okay.
Did I ever think it would play out like this? Absolutely not.
Okay.
And it affected relationships in general, not just romantic ones, like platonic ones. I remember moving to LA, and I just actually didn't want to make any new friends. I never wanted to experience that level of pain ever again in my life. Wow. So it was just like, I'm good on meeting people. Yeah. I would go to church. I would sit on the front row because there was a door by the front row, and I would just, amen. As soon as they close, I'm out the door. Yeah. And so I was very closed off. As outspoken as I have returned to become. I was inside of myself. Yeah. I loved to dress. I wasn't dressing. I just was existing in life. I would go to things because LA, you kind of got to be mixy if you want to make it. And I would go to things. I would sit in the corner of my phone. I didn't want to engage. Yeah. Because I never wanted to give anybody else an opportunity to hurt me that way.
Wow. Did it keep you out of, it doesn't sound like it kept you out of ministry, right? You're doing ministry again.
Yeah, I am now, but in the beginning, church. I was like, nah, I'm good on this.
Yeah. What boundaries and or warning signs? Like, how would you advise someone to avoid being in a similar situation? Would it be like, hey, pay attention to the church structure you're going to go to? Or like, is there any like red flags that you could say in hindsight so that people could avoid? Obviously, this is a very like dramatic situation.
I'm like, I hope this ain't just happening on the regular.
But I bet you it's happening more often.
For sure. Yeah. I learned that after the podcast. I was getting so many DMs. Yeah. Like, I experienced this, and some of them were still in those situations. I think my first advice is like, bro, know Jesus for yourself.
Come on.
Because I think that is what protected me. Because I don't think I could have saw the signs. Like, I mean, or even if I did, what would I have known to do with them? Sure. I think the biggest thing is like, in this instance is like, well, I could just go to another church. But when you've like given, like I was there for 8 years, I think I still haven't found a church that was as impactful as that one was, you know? And so I think that's the biggest thing. That's the best advice I can give you is like, know Jesus apart from any religious structure or like system that is created, because it's going to always fail you in one way or another. But Jesus doesn't.
Come on.
He is the same.
That's good.
And so that is something that I can hold on to is like, all right, at least I know Jesus for myself. And that will help you see the signs, because you'll be so aware of who Jesus is when you go into a place and he ain't there. You be like, ooh, I got to get out of here because this is not God.
That's good. That's good. What and how did you pray during this time? Curious to know how your prayer looked during this time. Meaning, what kind of stuff were you praying?
Lord, help me. No, like for real, like it seems over dramatic. I even go back and like look at some of my journals. A lot of my questions was like, why is this happening? Yeah. Like, and then it would like transition to like, okay, God, I really am gonna check out of here if I don't have. I either would have. I don't think in that moment I was ready to like lose life, but I probably would have like just snapped. I felt it because it was just building up, and I was getting so angry, and it was just because then it's like this thing we say now. They were playing in my face. You know what I'm saying? Essentially having these conversations. Some of the conversations I saw were about me.
No.
Yes, because he was. They were. He was also like mentoring him in our relationship. Yeah. So then it's kind of like a lot of it was like, God, if I don't go with you, I'm really not gonna make it. And so a lot of my prayers were like, okay, I'm waking up in the morning. It's like, all right, God, it's me and you. And I feel like too, like reading stories where I read a lot of David and Saul. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Because I needed that. And I needed to be able to go like, I could have killed you.
Yeah. David the way he dealt with Saul. It's such a fascinating story, because having the option and the opportunity to get back multiple times, and
he's like, nope.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Sean just sent a super chat. Thank you so much, brother. He said, she said, hurt people. That was a gym. How do we point non-Christians toward church when they have a negative view towards religion based on these situations that are all too common? That's a great question.
It is a great question.
I'm going to let you tackle that one. I got nothing for you.
No, I think like, I feel like y'all going to be like, dang, this girl keeps saying the same thing over and over again. I think for me, I'm never pointing nobody to church. I'm just pointing them to Jesus. Come on. Because I think that like, and I have a lot of thoughts about systems of church right now. Sure. This is really what God meant in the Bible. I don't know. Yeah. But I think what we could do if we have access to non-believers in our lives is to live out the version of Jesus we understand in our day-to-day lives.
That's good.
And not let the mishaps of church be louder as a representation of Jesus as our everyday lives. Yeah. Because again, a church is full of human beings who are imperfect people. We only serve a perfect God. That's good. So I think pushing non-believers to who our perfect God is, and not like quoting scriptures, but just living your life according to them, like being the scripture. Yeah. And I think that's the best way, which is sharing a story like this and saying, hey, in spite of what these people did, by the grace of God, I was able to still forgive them. Yeah, that's good. Did you go to therapy? Yes. How was that? The first round was rough. Okay. I did one in where I lived, and it was bad because I was like, I don't think you're a relationship counselor. I don't think you're a therapist, because I feel very much like you gutted me and then left me here to dry. my second therapist was great. She also specialized in rejection. And so she helped me process things, because there are other parts to this story, in the sense of like, the guy I was dating was my friend. And so even in this, like, in him talking, he's like apologizing. He's like, I don't want to be this person. Like, I want to journey through this. I even offered to journey through it with him. But then when I removed myself from the equation, in the sense of like, I'm not journeying through this with you so we could get back together. This is just like, because I care about you.
Wow.
And so we ended up having to like separate. I had to walk away from it because he kind of refused to separate too. In a sense of like, he didn't leave that church until my podcast came out.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And so the crazy thing is, like, he and I had a conversation December of 2021. And that was our first time talking. And it was probably the most like healing conversation ever. It was like exactly what we both needed. And he literally like shares like, I hate it when you drop that podcast. And then I'm like, and then he's like, but I had to leave after that. I said, I believe God did that for you.
Yeah.
Because you needed to get out of there a long time ago. But the fact that you chose to stay, I was like, God's still after you.
What was the age difference between the pastor and your boyfriend? Are we talking like 5 years, or are we talking like decades?
No, not decades. Because 5 years ago, he was 30. The guy I was dating was 30. And the pastor was in his 40s.
Okay, I mean, that's a decade.
Oh yeah, it is.
Not to mention the dominance hierarchy,
for sure.
Like the disproportion of power.
Absolutely.
And I say this not to make your boyfriend a victim.
No.
But there's a certain degree where
was.
There's a power imbalance
for
in
sure.
that situation. So if he knows this is something he struggled with
for
before,
sure.
and then there's these weird,
and he's also getting a family. He was getting a family out of it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
In a sense of like, in the parts that we didn't see is like, this is my family. And so like, for sure, we had a really great conversation. He's actually, I feel like if I say that, it's gonna do too much.
Let's protect protect
identity. for sure. No, I really want to do that. But we had a good conversation. And we landed on a good space.
Yeah. That's awesome. My therapist told me this, and I want to hear what you think about this. He said something really interesting to me. And let me mark some of these questions too before I forget. And it was hard for me to process this, but he said, love isn't just one directional. Love also has the opposite of love, and sometimes a righteous hatred towards things that are opposite of love. So if you love women, you hate the abuse of women.
For sure.
If you love babies, you hate the termination of babies.
Absolutely.
And that oftentimes, if we just lead with love, it's an incomplete picture of love, because love also has a component of hating the opposite of what it is you say you love. Would you agree with that in terms of, in hindsight, and like, I loved these people, but I hated what they did?
For sure.
Yeah.
But I think, yes, to answer your question, 100%. I love these people, hated what they did, but because I love these people, there is this level of empathy. I don't know where it came from. It has to be the Lord. That I had for them, in a sense of like I always say this thing, like, people don't hurt you from a place of wholeness. It's their brokenness.
Yeah, you said that at the panel.
Yeah, at the panel.
Yeah.
And that helps me process forgiveness, because I recognize that there is like, I really learned how to see them the way that God does. And so God doesn't see us for our mistakes and our shortcomings. There's a version he created us as, and because of Jesus, he can see us that way. And so there is like this level of empathy that like, man, your brokenness is now controlling your life. So much so that you're not even considering what you're doing to people. And I think for me, it was like, I didn't really start to get really angry when it was like, you trying to hold me to this think about the people thing. And it's like, did you think about the people? And you putting that weight on me kind of thing. Yeah. And so then it was kind of like, I am thinking about the people. That's why I'm still here. But, and so there is that, like, there's also the human side. How would it be? I mean, in therapy, I dealt with a lot of anger. And I would say, like, LA is a tough place to survive. And every time I would think about it, like every time I would go on a job interview and never hear back, I would go through this thing like I was angry. I didn't understand why I had to start my life over completely. And everybody else is just still moving on like nothing happened. I was super angry. I was disappointed with God, still trying to believe for stuff and not dealing with the fact that I just felt like my life would fall apart. Because I felt like, you know how you hold a box and then the bottom drops out and you like, everything fell out. That's kind of how it was. And it was hard to not view everything being like that.
Yeah. I think what was refreshing about hearing your story and then your heart for the local church was that sometimes we'll internalize things as church trauma.
Yeah.
That was just really accountability.
For sure. For sure. You just want to do what you want to do.
You just want to do what you want to do. You're supposed to sleep with girls. You want to do it. You want to do your thing. And then someone holds you accountable to it.
Yeah, you like,
oh, they hurt this church trauma. It's like, no,
they trying to control me.
That's not it. That's you being in your flesh,
for sure,
not wanting any accountability.
Yeah.
Where when I heard your story, I obviously I have this stuff from my childhood, but that's so far removed that it put into proper context whatever little issues I have had over the years with church. And I think that's sometimes people need to hear like an actual story like that to be like, you know what? My pastor
sat me down.
Or like my pastor didn't return my phone call. Or, you know, like I didn't feel very welcomed and loved on a Sunday morning. He didn't take me out to coffee. Like,
for sure.
That's not it. That's not what we're talking about. You're talking about actual power dynamics in a system that unfortunately allowed this sort of stuff to fall through the cracks without disciplinary action. For the sake of protecting the flock, but also to restore and protect this person. Because who knows if there was elder board systems that he would have established 10, 15 years ago, this may have gotten nipped in the bud earlier on. And so it's like, it becomes this massive issue that's not just one problem to solve. It's hard to process. So that's what I appreciate about that. It's like, man, I think this adds so much healthy context to people when they think about actual church trauma and deconstruction and this and that. It's like when we talk about deconstruction, people are deconstructing for not reasons like yours, but for historical, worldwide Christian values and virtues and ethics that aren't just Western patriarchy, white supremacy. No. The Ethiopian church believes these same things. The Coptic church believes the same things. The Armenian church, the church in India believes the church is unified on a couple core essential doctrines and a couple things that are like, nope, can't do this. Can't sleep with your girlfriend, right? Specific things. So when I hear people, deconstructing for sometimes what it seems like, I don't say petty reasons, but like, this is what it is. Like, this is what Christianity is. This is how God designed things. I'm sorry you don't like it, but it is what it is. That's not the same as what you went through. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, but I think there's a lot there in people's perspective on this stuff.
No, for sure. Like, and I think that's how we kind of got here, because somebody asked, like, how have you deconstructed and reconstructed your faith after church hurt? And I'm all like, I don't think I ever deconstructed my faith, because my faith is not rooted in a man. Like, well, yeah, but Jesus. And so I think too, to go back to your earlier question about like loving one thing and hating the other, I think I do feel that, which is why I have dedicated my life to teaching people that the most important thing is relationship with Jesus.
Come on.
Because I do have a hatred for systems that are built up, focused on man. Because that harms more people. Because there's no way you can uphold a perfect lifestyle. So at some point you're going to drop the ball somewhere and somebody's going to blame Jesus for it. Because you never taught them that although I'm prophesying to you, this came from God. And although I'm reading this word from you, there is a relationship that you can have with him. And so I think it did. I think that entire situation says, man, God, everybody ain't going to be able to walk this the way Brenda walked this. So I also have created spaces for people that says, hey, I get that you ain't rocking with church right now, but I want you to still be rocking with Jesus. And so it changed the way I led. So I led a team of creatives. At the last church I was at, 12 of them. And I am very aware that when you serve in those capacities in the church, you oftentimes don't get Jesus because you're creating spaces for people to get it. Yeah. So I would have conversations with my team like, I'm pretty sure nobody's going to agree with this, but if you don't have it today and you need to go get the word, you can text me and say, Brenda, I can't make it today. I need to go to this church. And I did. I took them to a conference. I made the church pay for it. And it was a presence people conference. It was just a conference that they could cry. They could experience the presence of God. Yeah. No, I don't want them to learn how to work a camera. I want them to encounter Jesus. That's good. Because if you ever walk away from this job, I don't want you to also walk away from Jesus. Come on. And so I've learned to, no matter where I am, to create a space where, hey, this don't ever know my name, don't ever quote anything I said. Did you meet Jesus? That's good. Did you want to have a deeper relationship with him? And so I think it did. It ignited this thing in me to say, church is gonna be trash sometimes, and so are people who lead the churches. But at the end of it, go find another church and be like, all right, Jesus, where are we going now? Because this ain't it. This don't got. And also, people are being deceived in this time. Yeah. You know why? Because nobody really knows Jesus apart from the systems and structures that have been created. Yeah. And so I think that's what it's done for me, is like create a space for like, all right, I don't care. We can pop up at a coffee house and this is what it looks like to encounter Jesus. And not just for this moment so we can say, ooh, the fire really fell, but that you feel so compelled to like, hey, I want to go read my Bible and know the Jesus that she knows that he knows. That's
good. Come on. I was talking to a friend of mine and we were talking about this idea of like your brand or what. I hate those. I had all those words. But he asked me, he said, sometimes when you're building something, you got to know what the enemy is to said thing. And he's like, so who's your enemy? Not in a literal sense, like what demographic of people, but who's your enemy? And I remember like really marinating on that. And I was like, my enemy is faithlessness or unfaithfulness. Yeah. Like when people are operating their life without faith because of hurt, because of how they perceive other people, or when they're actually being unfaithful in their lives. Like that is the thing that like I'm just angry about, and channeling that into creating the opposite of that. Like channeling that into creating more faithful people that live their life based on faith in Jesus. Yeah. But knowing what that anti thing is, you know, and it sounds like you have a good grasp of that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Guys, if you enjoyed this video, partner with us in our online community. And to get access to our private Discord, access to our podcast before they go public, and so much more for as little as $5 a month. Keep us independent, staying away from brand deals, and ever have to make a goofy commercial like these.
Our friends at Genucel Skincare have exciting news to celebrate in 2023.
Using Manscaped during my showers after workout has given me much more confidence.
And that's where Mud Water comes in.
True Classic has got your back.
All thanks to the sponsor of today's video, SayMine.com.
Established Titles is your opportunity to earn the title of Laird or Lady. Subject to credit approval, rates range from 7.99% APR to 19.99% APR, included 0.50% auto pay discount.
If you don't want us to make ads with brands you don't care about, sign up for our online community for as little as $5 a month to keep us independent and ultimately answering to you as our boss. You get all sorts of benefits like daily replays of our after party streams, exclusive access to our Discord community, and early access to our podcast interviews, all starting for only $5 a month.
Kingstream Entertainment.